might come up.
Yeah, that's come up. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Mark, aka the Bowlerhat Farmer, and I do very few actual interviews where I interview other people. So today's a bit of a pleasure to be able to interview Ian Clifford. Now, Ian, we had a brief conversation the other day, and I say brief because I'm a great believer in to know something, you need to know it well, and I do not understand, even after you kindly gave me an hour and a half of your time to talk about the simpleness of the complexity of what we're going to talk about. Now, from my side, I've been on the circuit now for a couple of years, and I've looked into lots of different solutions to how to, I don't want to say wiggle round the law, because I don't think we should be doing that at all. I think what we've got to be is completely outside of ever putting ourselves in the position of being in an awkward position with the law. And after our conversation the other day, you kindly sort of covered that side for me. So I guess what I would like to get out of today, if it's possible, is for most of my viewers, Ian, I'm going to put on the same level as myself. Genuine working people who who have been integrally bred to go to work, earn some money, pay some tax, think themselves lucky they've got something left, and then suddenly I come across people like yourself and you tell me that's not necessarily all the case. So, Ian, please, if we can break this down into bite-sized pieces today, if we can take the elephant and slice it into little bits. Firstly, your organisation, tell me a little about the setup, because obviously you're very different from what I understand to everybody else. And that's, to me, was the key piece when we spoke, what makes this worth doing, from my side, worth doing the interview.
Well, yeah, that's a really good intro. Thank you. I'll do my best to explain this. It can take a while for it to sink in. That's one of the problems, because the level of programming that we've all been subjected to all our lives is, it takes a while to absorb what I'm going to say, and I'll try and make it as easy as possible for the viewers to get their head around it. It's taken me about 20 years since the Crown destroyed my financial services organisation, which was pretty big, and I used to be operating with a lot of high-profile financial services companies and individuals, and I came from a professional background, whatever that's supposed to mean. Sadly, I've got letters after my name if I ever wanted to use them, but I don't. So I'm a little bit different from the average guy who's talking about, the sovereign projects and things like this, and, man under God and common law and all of these types of things. I'm not saying I'm any better. I'm just saying I've come from a different background. I started off at the age of 19 in financial services, I was expected to play professional football. That came to an end. I had a head-on car collision and that ruined my spine, and that was the end of my football career. And up until then, that's all I thought about was playing football. And then suddenly I had to do something else, and I went into financial services at 19, and by 23 I had a wealth management practice which was directly authorized with the our friends, what was called the Financial Services Authority, now called the Financial Conduct Authority, and that was something bit different. Not many guys in their early 20s were running a wealth management practice, and then I got all the qualifications, and the practice got pretty big, and I had a fairly unique way of building my client base back then. I was a bit bold, I think. So I used to go to accountants and lawyers, and I used to say to them, look, if you indulge me for an hour, if I can't show you how to improve your finances, I'll pay your hourly rate. And that was quite intriguing to a lot of them. 23-year-old lads coming in their offices, these guys who slightly arrogant, approach and quite slightly arrogant attitude towards money and what they thought they knew. And invariably, I took on a lot of accountants and lawyers as personal clients, and then they started referring their clients to me, and my practice went, went exponential in growth. By the age of early 30s, I had so many clients, I just couldn't cope with it. When you deal with people's money, and that's all you deal with all their money, their business money, their personal money, or their various financial arrangements. You're and if you're good at it, and I think I was good at it, because a lot of people said I was. You're in demand, and I found myself working 7 day a week. This is back before the internet and before all the video meetings and all the stuff that we've got now. I'm a couple of months away from being 60 now, so I'm going back 40 odd years. And everything was done on the telephone. Everything was done in meetings. Everything was done by people coming to see you at your office, or you going to see them. So there was a lot of traveling and a lot of phone conversations and a lot of paperwork and all that kind of thing. And it's very different now, the world we're in now, with all the technology, which is supposed to be making our lives easier. But I actually think our lives are more complicated now than they used to be all those years ago. So I back in those days, I was very heavily programmed in the matrix. Financial services, investment banking, fund management, all these types of things I got involved in. Pension trustee, I was a pension trustee for a while, and I got offered an opportunity to solve a big problem for Saga, the retirement group. I was in my mid-30s, and they came to me and they said, because they'd heard I was good at putting plans together, they came to me and said, could you solve this problem? We want a safe income plan for our customers using their property. And so I went away from the meeting thinking, well, that's a really interesting problem, because a lot of people have got property, they think they've got property. We'll come back to that. And they want an income, and they don't have a mortgage on the property necessarily, or maybe they do, maybe it's small by comparison to the perceived value, but they want an income. A lot of these guys are 60 plus. I was in my mid to late 30s then, so it was a very different I had a different outlook on the world back then, and they wanted an income stream that was safe without losing the property. So without going into long stories, I basically designed a program which was called the Enrichment Plan, and I needed some heavyweight financial services partners to make it work. I partnered with Prudential Insurance Company. I partnered with what was called Bank of Scotland. It later became Lloyds Bank after a few iterations and a few changes. And I had these four heavyweights, three heavyweights: Saga, Prudential, Bank of Scotland. And my plan had never been done before. Everybody looked at it in great detail. They loved it. And I got offered a contract by all of them to sign up with a tripartite agreement with all the three of them, for me to deliver this enrichment plan to the UK consumer market. And it was like, for me back then, and loving solving problems and not doing it for the money, even though the money was nice and my wife liked the money. I was actually doing it because I like solving problems, and nobody'd solved that problem. Long story short, I was called to a meeting by Bank of Scotland, and they said it wasn't the right time for them to launch it, having spent a year looking at it with all the other big firms. But they wanted to offer me something else, which was an unlimited credit line, which is pretty unheard of. Banks don't normally give that out. But there were some caveats, and I didn't realize at the time that the caveats that came with it, that sort of rolled in with the deal, were that I had to operate under their strict instructions on how I use that credit line, what I could use it for, etc. My firm would be the face of it. We would go out and promote it, and the type of programs that I was building with using that credit program or credit line were very tightly controlled by the bank. But nevertheless, I built 12 individual programs. They were all unique. I went out to the wealth management market. So some of the biggest wealth managers in the UK were my customers. We started distributing these 12 programs, and it was a slightly slow start because people didn't get their head around it for a while. Then it took off. And then, that was 2001, 2007. I've got one of the biggest firms in the UK in that area. And I'm doing very well. And, I'm riding high and I'm enjoying life. And, I had all the trappings. I had the big mansion. I had the cars. I had all the stuff that, that you get if you're in that sort of area. And I wasn't doing it for the money. I was just doing it for problem solving, really. And I enjoyed it. A lot of people said I was good at it. My firm won lots of awards, and I was genuinely having a good time until 2007 came, and then I was called to the bank's headquarters at the Bank of Scotland, which had become Halifax Bank of Scotland then, and they basically offered me a deal, which was, without going into a lot of detail, it's in my documentary. It's called the documentary is called The Disruptor. It's an 11-part documentary all about this sort of 10-year journey, a 10, 15-year journey I've been on. And basically, without going into all the details, the bank was planning on taking the assets that the credit line was secured against. And they were going to do that within the next year or two. And they wanted to know whether I was going to object. Now, being my firm's name was on all the programs, and we had about £1 billion worth of assets that my firm was administering. It was pretty chunky. And they were basically saying they were going to wipe it all out and take the assets for themselves. And was I going to be opposing them in doing that, or was I going to be with them? And obviously I chose to oppose them, which was a big decision because here I am all these years later, and I'm still got the consequences of that decision, but it was the right decision.
So can I just jump in there quickly? So the assets they wanted to take, what were they physically? Because obviously I'm making the assumption I know what they are, but so I'm not wrong.
You probably don't know what they are. I mean, part of them were property, because a lot of people use property as collateral for the bank's credit line.
Yeah.
But what I did was I've always been quite technical, right? So back in those days, and we're talking 25 years ago, there were life insurance companies that had trillions of assets, and they're called with-profit profit funds. So these were life insurance company funds where they would add bonuses to the policies each year. Those bonuses were locked in, guaranteed, and they had an intrinsic value, and you could buy them on the secondary market. So I created a secondary market to buy these policies from the consumer, pay them more than the life company would pay them, but less than they were worth. And these assets would appreciate at a rate which was greater than the credit line cost. So, for example, if the credit line was costing 5% a year interest, the portfolio of life insurance assets was growing at 9%. So there was a 4%, what's known in the industry as an arbitrage. It's a difference in rates. And that's what the bank was interested in. They wanted the life insurance assets and the property. And we had $1 billion of life insurance assets in all different programs, thousands of individual programs. So not one big fund. These were individual managed accounts with life insurance assets in them, property, mostly those two. And I had a big team. I had over 200 staff managing all the administration, by acquiring all the life policy assets, putting them into portfolios. It was a big, big chunky organization, very busy, and it was unique. There was nobody else doing it the way we were doing it, and it was working really well. All the programs were on course. They're on target. Nobody was under stress. People were taking a cash flow out in many cases to finance things like school fees or their retirement, or funding their mortgage payments, or funding their business expenses. So these programs had multiple sort of solutions attached to them, which is why they were so popular. And the bank basically was telling me that what they were going to do within the next year or two was they were going to down value all the assets and then come and seize them. And that's pretty much what they did. And the banks do this a lot. I didn't realise how often banks do this, but it's a boom and bust cycle that they do a lot. And what they were really asking me was I going to be with them on that plan or not? And if I was going to be with them, they'd look after me. And if I was going to oppose them, basically, it's like going to dinner with the mafia boss. You know, if you don't say yes, you'll go with him, then you're probably going to end up in the boot of a car somewhere, you know, tipped over the edge of a cliff. And that's pretty much what it was like, without going into all the detail and all the names of the people that I was in that meeting with. Needless to say, they were quite senior members of the banking community. So what basically they were saying to me was I going to be with them or against them? And if you're with them, and this is where the tipping point comes, it's my opinion that anybody who rises high enough in any of these pyramids, whether it's health, whether it's government, whether it's banking, whether it's financial services, whether it's pharmaceutical, wherever it is you are, energy, at some point, if you get big enough, they're going to ask you what side are you on? You're on the dark side or on the light side? Because if you're on the light side, they're going to destroy you. And that's pretty much what they've been doing to me ever since.
Well, we've seen this in the food industry. You know, from my side, coming from the food industry, Ian, we've seen this. If you look at the head of DEFRA, a WEF member. If you look at the head of the NFU, a WEF member. All the way up the line, on every platform to do with food or farming, the top people are all in the WEF. And that's the most corrupt organisation that I've ever come across in the world. So I think that just goes to show you're right. It doesn't matter what field it is of industry. The minute you start rising to the top, then you start getting pulled out to achieve something for somebody else.
I think if you're a bit useful, if you've got the ability to build something, grow it, whatever it is you're doing, you might get selected. And I think I was selected as one of those guys that could build something that they wanted. And I didn't want to build it the way they wanted to build it, because I don't want to destroy people's finances. I want to give them a good time. I want to show them how you can make your finances work more efficiently. That's what I've been doing all my career up to that point. So to be offered a deal which was going to wipe people out for my benefit, so basically I would be enriched and all the plan holders would be destroyed. Now that's never a deal I could do. You can't determine what markets might do. They might go up and down, and maybe you can't affect that. But if you know that that's what the outcome is that they're looking for, and they're asking you, which side of the fence are you going to be on? There's no way I'm going to be on their side. And that was one of the big wake-up calls for me. I mean, needless to say, in the next 2-3 years, they achieved their plan. I fought them tooth and nail for a long time, but eventually they achieved their plan. And then you realise that the banks run the regulators. It's not the other way around. A lot of people think that the financial regulators control the markets. Well, they don't. It's the banks that control the markets. And there's a very good reason why it works like that, which we'll come to, because they control all the money supply. And that's the crux of the problem, but it's also where all the solutions are. So long story short, I fought them. I lost. The regulator destroyed my firm by creating a massive liability that didn't exist. I had to liquidate the firm. The regulator then bribed the liquidator to accept that my firm was to blame for all these losses, this up to 1 billion of losses. It was all over the TV. There was 2 TV programs. There was front page newspaper articles. There was radio commentary about it. There was internet, you name it, it was there, magazines, the whole lot. So suddenly I've gone from being the guy that was being asked to go to these dinners and speak at dinners and go and lecture people on how I built my firm to the size I built it. Suddenly nobody wanted to talk to me. Suddenly I became the villain, and that was a new experience for me, because I'd always had a good reputation. I don't have a good reputation now, by the way. It's by design. So they can't let the good guys have a good reputation. They have to keep destroying it, because that's one of the ways that they control the narrative and control the rollout of anything good. The
Well,
next
yeah.
10 years, I tried to build other things. I couldn't get a license to trade. You know, I couldn't manage money anymore. I couldn't be wealth management, money management. Couldn't do all the things I used to do. And I tried 7 times. 7 times they didn't deny me a license, but they didn't grant it either. It just ran out of time. So then I partnered with firms that had a license, and I provided them with my technical ability and my management ability and my leadership, you know, of how to do things. And a lot of these firms wanted to work with me because they knew what I'd done before, but I couldn't be at the front of the house. I had to be behind the curtain. But as soon as the regulator knew I was behind the curtain, they came in and destroyed the firms. So there's 7 ventures that were destroyed in mafioso tactics. And then we get to 2018, and then that's the first time they tried to jail me because they obviously thought I was a bit of a nuisance, and I wasn't going away. So they tried to jail me by, it's called the breach of the general prohibition, which for the layman means that they say you might need a license to do something, which was managing money, even though they know you don't need one because you're not actually managing any money. But they try and lay up a plan, a strategy that makes it look like you might need a license, and then you don't have one, and then they can convict you for not having a license for something you don't actually need a license for. So that's a playbook they use a lot. They tried it, destroyed a big venture I was involved in that took me 3 years to build with a group of others in the financial services world. They destroyed all that, and then they tried to jail me. But they didn't realise that they'd left a little loophole in their case, and I managed to exploit it. And I actually beat them in the High Court in 2018. It's UK Innovative TI versus the Financial Conduct Authority. And I don't think they've ever been beaten before, and they didn't like that too much. So then they had to have another go, which they did in 2023. And that was more aggressive, and I then had to get really smart on how to avoid being jailed for probably forever, to be quite fair, because, you know, there's a guy I know well in the US. His name is Martin Armstrong. He served 9 years for allegedly a civil matter, you know, a breaching of an order, civil constraint. He served 9 years for not complying with an order in the US. And that's what they were trying to do to me from 2023 onwards. Extraordinary. I've even made a documentary about it. It's called Entrapment by Design, because they even invent a prosecutor. They've invented a fictional character to be their prosecutor. They've got no evidence whatsoever, right? You can't make it up, but it is absolutely true. They've got Alistair Mackenzie, who doesn't exist, as their prosecutor. Who they claim is one of their senior prosecutors at the FCA. He doesn't even exist. So that's where it starts. And then you've got, you know, it's the same playbook. They say, oh, you might need a license. They know you don't for doing what I do. They know you don't need one, but they have to investigate. So then they can investigate whether you need a license. They come and raid your offices. They come and take all your kit. They freeze all your funds. And then they say to you, well, we're going to have to keep on investigating. And whilst they're investigating, they constrain your life. So if you step 1 foot outside the tram line, then they're going to jail you for being in breach of the constraint order. So I went to Indonesia and started operating from there, because my organization is worldwide. And they didn't like that too much because they don't have jurisdiction in Indonesia. And then I came to North Cyprus, which is where I am now, and I don't have jurisdiction here either. But I actually laid a few other things on top of that, which I call the envoy protocol, or it's a jurisdictional shield, which they can't really easily penetrate. And that's something that maybe we'll talk about a bit later. And they actually got what they wanted. They actually did get a conviction, not of Ian Clifford, the guy you're looking at on the camera, because that's the living man. They got the conviction over Ian Clifford's stamp, which is their body corporate, which also we ought to talk about a little bit. So they got the conviction, but it's not me.
Yeah.
It's the body corporate that they created following the birth certificate registration. And the extraordinary thing about the conviction was that not only have they not got a prosecutor, but they've got no evidence whatsoever that any financial services were provided without a license. 500 of our members sent a witness statement to the court saying that they'd never been offered any services that require a license. They were all ignored. And they still didn't find any evidence anywhere. And they've been investigating it for 5 years. So they managed to get a conviction with no evidence, no real prosecutor, over something which they've never proven, on the basis that they say I breached an order, which I didn't, because the order didn't apply in Indonesia. And then they got a conviction, and it's currently at the European Court for Human Rights, because I've created a ministry. So I'm a church envoy. I'm actually the head of the church. And you know, they are, and it's also gone to the International Criminal Court at The Hague. And I don't like any courts, by the way. I've been in quite a few of them. I know my way around.
And I'm sure most people.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that most people, Ian, like me, in the past, me, would have found it difficult to believe that their own government would do such things. I've been on the receiving end of it as well with the Department of Trade and Industry, and how they behaved was just second to none, over and above. It was just commercial bullying. There was no other wording for it. And whilst you could pick to bits the case inside out, no sooner do you get in front of the judge with the facts that state you are innocent, you're still found guilty. Because the old boys club, which they all belong to on the bar, is never going to see, from my opinion, one of them lose the case. No. Let's face, if you go into court with a barrister behind you, the barrister who wins or the barrister who loses still wins. It's you as the person going in and standing in the dock what's the one what doesn't win either way. So you lose either way. I've won in Crown Court and come out and it cost me £230,000. I've lost in Crown Court and I still paid £230,000. So what's the difference? Both times the barristers won. Whether I won or not didn't matter. Okay, so let's roll on past this bit. So you've come up with, dare I say, a solution, a system, as by where you can assist people to reclaim a certain money in a certain manner, and to be able to also put themselves inside a particular custody, like you just spoke about, if custody is the correct word, that you can then protect yourself from most of the nonsense that they want to throw at you, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned this the hard way, you know, which is, for me, it's the only way you do learn, really. I had to come up with some very innovative solutions because they've been gunning for me since 2010, really. So 15 years of full on, and it's heavyweight members of the Crown. It's not. Yeah. It's not down the bottom. It's not in the magistrates' court. We're talking the highest courts in the UK. I've had court cases scrubbed from the record. There's been all sorts of funs and games. There's been all kinds of fraud, deceptions, and dark tactics being used, which is what they do. But that's not really where the problem is. You see, I remember reading The Art of War some time ago. And you've got to know your enemy. You've got to know what their infrastructure is. You've got to know how they hang and what's going on with them. And that's where I ultimately, having battled in all the conventional ways, you know, everybody goes to barristers, QCs, gets big law firms. I did all of that in the early days. I tried to get justice. I couldn't believe how corrupt everything was. Time and time again, you learn that you're not going to beat them in their environment. You know, it doesn't matter what your facts are. It doesn't matter how good you think you are, or if you've got people with you that are very good and got a good track record. It doesn't make any difference, because what you don't realise, and I realised this about 7 years ago, was that it's rigged, and everybody that you think is with you is with them. And that's where the problem is. They're not with you. They just bill you. They're with the club. You know, they're all signed up with the bar. So if you think that your lawyer, your barrister, your QC is there to help you, you haven't had enough experience yet. You wait for a while, and you'll realise that they're not with you at all, even though they might appear to be, because they play a very good game. Those guys, they never lose. And what you also realise is that they do deals with each other behind the closed doors, and you don't know the deal they're doing, because they're all in it together. It's an old boys club. You've got to be in the bar to practice. They don't represent you at all. They only represent the system, the same as the regulator doesn't represent the consumer. They represent the system. Everyone at the top is looking after the system, not after the man on the street, which brings us back to, well, where does it all begin? You know, how did they trap us all into this deception? And that's where I started going. You know, about 7-8 years ago, I started thinking, this is ridiculous. There has to be a solution for this problem. And a lot of people have tried. I did loads of research. I've tried a few things out that some people say work, that don't work, because I've tried them and they don't work. So you end up doing trial and error, end up doing more and more research, and then eventually the penny drops. And that's what happened for me. And that's why we've got what we call the Great Escape protocols, which are all based on things that do work. And it's taken me years to get to this point. So that's what I'd like to explain, really. You know, how did I get to what I know now? And I think I know.
I mean, one thing I would add.
Go on.
Yeah.
You were saying, Mark, you said one thing you were going to add, and I didn't hear what you said. Have we lost the sound?
What I was going to say is, and even if you naively go into court and win the day, you've only won that day. And what I found with the government is that if you win on the day, you don't win long term, because they'll always, even if you come out of court with a success, they've already listed you on the wanted list with the government in a different department by the time you leave court. And that I witnessed that time and time again. The more I challenged the system, and that's why I think you're right. You know, in the conversation we had the other day, you can't beat them in a court system, because inside their own environment, you're just batting your head against the wall. So I think that brings us on nicely to what you've created, because for me, that's where the excitement's all of where you've got to, like the knowledge. You're like me, you've got massive amounts of knowledge in the background that's got you to where you are today. And now we're at the exciting bit, because for me, when we spoke the other day and you spoke about what you did, what you're going to talk about, that, to be fair, blew my head, because I was like, I'm programmed to know that can't be right.
Well, absolutely, yeah. And aren't we all? You know, they want us programmed to believe things that aren't true. And in fact, the world mostly is inverted. It's, you know, everything that we think is true is probably a lie, and everything we think is a lie is probably true. It really is like that. And it's like Alice in Wonderland, you know, in many ways. And, you know, that movie, The Wizard of Oz, that a lot of us watched when we were kids, is that they're actually telling you a story and you don't realize it. And, you know, the
Follow the Yellow Brick Road.
Follow the Yellow Brick Road, and the guy behind the curtain and all that stuff. And they, you know, all these things that we just thought were cartoons or movies or stories that are fictional are actually probably true. And a lot of the things we've learned, you know, bless our mum and dad, they told us what they thought was true, but a lot of it wasn't true. The teachers told us things that they thought were true. They're not true. You might have gone into higher education. A lot of the bullshit they teach you there is just not true. I went into finances and I did 7 years of intensive study. You know, I've got all these qualifications, and most of it is completely missing the point. They don't teach you what you need to know. And that's what I discovered, what you really need to know. And I can tell you that I've discarded probably 85% of what I've learned to be rubbish and there's no value to it. And I've kept 10 or 15%. And it's about like that. So let me explain what I've discovered, and this is why so many people are very excited when I do my webinars and I do my other interviews. A lot of people, once they get their head around what I'm going to explain, they wonder why they didn't know it before, and it's life-changing information. So let's start the journey. It starts with the birth certificate. And a lot of people talk about the birth certificate. Some people get it right, some people don't. In my research, this is what happened. Your mum and dad probably, if you're my age, they might not have gone to the hospital, but a lot of people did, even 60 years ago. Now it's almost exclusively in the hospital,
Yeah.
right? So what they want you in there, they want mum and dad in the hospital because they want to take the placenta away. They want that placenta. And that placenta is going to die because it's not going to live. It's being separated from the mother. So after a while, it dies. And what they do is they register the placenta, and that placenta registration forms what's known as a body corporate. So it becomes a corporate entity. So it's like forming a company. And it's joined through the DNA to the baby. So there is a natural joinder of DNA linkage between the placenta and the baby. It's very gruesome, I know, and a lot of people might think, what's this got to do with remedy? But it's got a lot to do with it, right? So what they've done is they've created this certificated entity, which if you look at the birth certificate, I'm not going to say your birth certificate, you don't have one. You have a document which is called a certified entry. And you look at it and it says, don't use this as a form of identification. So that's a bit of a clue, right? Then it's got a date on there, the date it's registered. Well, that in most cases is not the day that you were born. It's a different day. And then you've got a reference number on there. So it starts to look a bit like a company. It's got a reference number. It's got a name. It starts to look a bit corporate because it is corporate. But it's also a trust because they create trust.
Date of incorporation.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like you've incorporated a company, right? And that's exactly what's going on. Now, the name of the company, it could be Smith or Jones or Brown or whatever family name, together with the reference number. That makes a unique corporate entity. Now, a lot of people would say there's lots of Browns, there's lots of Smiths, lots of Joneses that are out there. So how can it be unique? Well, it is unique with the number. The name and the number, it makes it unique, and the date it's registered. Those three things make it unique. And you might be thinking, well, why would they want that? You know, why didn't they just say, you know, this baby's now been born, let's give it a bit of paper, it's got an identity. Well, you don't actually get any bit of paper for the living baby. But you wind the clock forward to the age of 18 or 21, and the baby's now grown up. It's become a man or a woman, and it starts using that name on the birth certificate innocently without realizing that that's the big trick, and the big deception starts with the fact that everybody uses the name on the birth certificate as if it's them. Well, that creates a fraud because you can't use a name that doesn't belong to you. And a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but that's my family name. It has to belong to my family. Well, how many Smiths, Jones and Browns are there? It's not all the same family, is it? So it's not your name, right? It's the surname, family name is a unique name together with the reference number and the date of incorporation. That makes it unique. Now, the big reason why they've set this up, there are two reasons. The first is because everybody uses that name and they use it under an impersonation fraud. So that takes away the rights of the living man or woman. Because if you go around saying that you're Michael Jackson or you're Muhammad Ali or you're whatever, you're impersonating someone else, yeah? And that's a fraud. In the law, that's impersonation fraud, and it's going to take away all your rights. So what they've done is they've made it look as if you've got rights, make it look as if you can win in court, make it look as if you've got human rights, but they don't treat you as a human because you're operating under this impersonation fraud. So that makes you a pauper. It makes you a ward of the crown. The living man, woman now has got no rights, right down the bottom in the third estate as a commoner, as operating under an impersonation fraud. That's very, very deliberate, right? So that's kind of law stuff. But then there's another reason why they created the birth certificate in the way that they did. And that goes together with the bankruptcy of all of the corporate nations. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, what are you talking about now in the bankruptcy of the nations? We all know they're a bit short of cash. No, it's much worse than that. It's way, way worse than that.
Yeah.
So if you understand monetary history, and I could talk all day long about monetary history because it's something I know a lot about. But if you just take the big pieces of information, there's nothing backing money apart from energy, and it's our energy that backs the money, right?
Yeah.
There's no gold, there's no silver, there's no physical asset that backs it. It's our energy that backs it, right? And how did they manage to get our energy to back the money? If you like, there is no money, because money's not really what it appears to be. It's currency, not really money, but everyone calls it money. So common parlance is to describe it as how much money have you got, or how much money did you spend, how much money did you lose. It's all these references to money, but there really isn't any money. There's only currency. So if you then look at, well, how did they trick us into believing that there's money of substance? Because there used to be money of substance, and they never told us that that went away. Unless you're a monetary scholar, you're not going to realize that way over 100 years ago, they took the gold away. Yeah, so they had to replace the gold with something else. Well, in 1914, they brought out under the United States Incorporated, because it's a corporate country, like all countries are corporate. They rolled out the Federal Reserve Act. Now, if you're in Australia or Canada, or you're operating in England, you're going to say, well, what's that got to do with me? And actually, it's got everything to do with you, because the United States Incorporated went into bankruptcy in 1933. And this is something called House Joint Resolution 192. So the Federal Reserve Act came out in 1914, 1913 actually, because it was actually brought into law in 1914, right at the beginning of the First World War, which is obviously no coincidence. Then the next thing happens is you go through the First World War, you go through the boom of the 20s, then you have the Great Depression, right? So they have to create a big depression so that they can bring out the bankruptcy of the United States. They can roll that out. And that's what House Joint Resolution 192 tells you, that the United States as a corporate entity went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And what they did then was they had, in order to finance the reorganization of the United States Incorporated, is they took a mortgage out over all of the birth certificates. So every registered birth certificate in the world is now pledged to underwrite, by securitizing the energy of the living men and women, the bankruptcy of the United States. Now, a lot of people are going to say, as I said earlier, what's that got to do with me? I live in Wales. I live in Ireland. I live in Australia, you know. Well, the reason why it's got everything to do with it is because if you look at the EDGAR database and you look at the Securities and Exchange Commission, all of these countries, United Kingdom, you know, Canada, Australia, every single country is actually registered as a corporate entity to the United States Incorporated. And you can see this on the EDGAR database. All the councils are corporate. Everything is corporate. So then you start to realize, well, maybe there's a one world system going on here. It's not all countries vying with each other, trading with each other with deficits and all this nonsense that people are talking about on the TV, tariffs and all this kind of nonsense. No, it's a one world system. And it went bankrupt in 1933. And in order to finance it, they took all the birth certificates as collateral for the bankruptcy. But what they also gave back, because that came with the gold, by the way, took all the gold away as well. They took the gold, they took gold out of circulation, they took a mortgage over all the birth certificates, and then they created this scenario where if you know how the system works, which I do, all of the banks became nominees for us. So that, you know, a lot of people are going to say, well, what's a nominee and why would they do that? So here's how it works, right? So they've already tricked us into having no rights in the law. So you know you're not going to win in a courtroom. It's not good enough saying you're a man under God or you're under common law or the Constitution's going to help you, because none of those things apply if you're operating under an impersonation fraud. So that's why they laugh all those things out of court, right? Because none of them apply, because you walked in there as a fraudster. Right. They got you covered there. You've got no rights. Then you get into the commerce side. Now, this is where I start describing it as the game of Monopoly, because it is a game of Monopoly. Just like when Monopoly was first introduced, if you go and look at the history of the game, it came out around the time of the Federal Reserve. And they're actually telling us that we're all going to start playing Monopoly, but we don't realize it, right? So on that Monopoly board, you have to have a piece. Well, in the game, you might have the shoe or the car or the iron or something. But in this game, it's the person. It's the body corporate that's been created from the birth certificate. That's the piece that goes round and round the Monopoly board. And that board is artificial. There's nothing real about it. It just looks real. And then you say, well, how do you finance the Monopoly game? Well, this is what they do. You see, there's no money in any bank. There is no money. There's only ledgers. So banks don't have money, full stop. And you can prove this by reading the Bank of England's paper, Money in the Modern Economy. You can have a look at the Federal Reserve's paper, Modern Money Mechanics. You can have a look at Professor Richard Werner's work, How Banks Create Money Out of Nothing, and lots of other empirical research. The banks don't have any money. So when they pretend to make a loan or a mortgage, they don't have anything to lend, right? So what you realize is that banks don't take deposits and they don't lend money. So that makes you wonder, what do they do? And how is it that some of them go bust? Well, the only ones that go bust are the ones that fight against the system, like Lehman Brothers, like Bear Stearns, like a whole list of others, Count Think Bank. A lot of the banks that don't like the way that the cabal run the Monopoly board are forced into bankruptcy. All the rest stay afloat. And I could talk about that for a long time, but I won't bother because it's a bit too off the topic. But basically, if you're in the club, they keep you alive because there's no money. If you look at a bank's charter, it will tell you that the bank is not permitted to lend money. So that's an interesting fact, isn't it? That people think they're going to borrow money from the bank, but in its own charter and in the articles of its association, it says that banks can't lend money. So what are they doing? Well, this is where it starts. Lending credits. Yeah, this is where it starts to get interesting, and this is why when I started talking about this in a lot of detail in 2023, this is when the Crown tried to jail me because they don't want people to know this, right? Right. So the banks, following HJR 192, and also the publication of an IRS paper, which everybody needs to read this paper. It's called IRS Publication 1212. And it's what's called original issue discount, which is a bit technical for a lot of people. But if you were to read that paper a few times, you might start to get some clues as to what's going on. If you go to a bank and you say, I want to open a bank account, the first thing is the bank account is not in the name of the living man or woman. The bank account is in the name of the body corporate person. So no man or woman's ever had a bank account. That's the first thing that people need to realize. So they are the agent for that body corporate, and they're operating that body corporate that sits on the Monopoly board. If you look at the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882, it tells you that a person is a banker. So that person that's on the birth certificate, which is not a living man or woman, is actually a banker. Well, why would they need it to be a banker? Why would they need that? Well, what they need to use that person for is to put credit on the Monopoly board. So that's what's going on. So the person operates by depositing securities onto the Monopoly board. So let me give you an example. You open a bank account and you get somebody to transfer some funds to your bank account. Well, whoever it is who's transferring those funds in, what they're actually doing is creating a new security. And this is all described in Professor Richard Werner's paper, is the best paper to describe this, that how banks create money out of nothing. So let's suppose that, I think we did this on our chat. Let's suppose that you were, sadly, you're a banker on this example, and I'm the customer, right? So I'm going to come in the bank and say, I want an account, and you say, yeah, tick all the boxes. You give me a bank account. I think it's my account, but it's actually the body corporate's account.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to pay some money in, right? So I'm a bit flushed. I'm going to put £10,000 in the account, right?
Yeah.
So I put 10,000 in there, and the account looks like it's got 10,000 of my money in there. So I'm not going to argue about that. That's exactly what I'm expecting. But what actually happened was when I typed in some digits on my computer screen, probably to transfer the funds in, or did it on my phone, what actually happened was I deposited a security with the bank. So if you were a banker, whichever bank you're working with, they take that as a deposit, and they show it on their balance sheet as their asset. And then on the other side of the balance sheet, they create a matching liability. Well, that matching liability is debt. So the trillions of world debt, which probably is way north of 400 trillion now, that is all it is deposits of securities in banks, which is promises to pay in the future from a banker. So the person's the banker making a promise to pay in the future.
Yeah.
Because there's no money, you can't pay anything. All you can do is promise to pay in the future. If you look at the banknote, it says promise to pay the bearer. If you get a check out, if you've still got one of those checkbooks, you promise to pay. Yeah, there is no way of paying anything. All you can do is deposit a security as a banker. So the bank that you're depositing it takes it on their balance sheet, holds it on one side of the balance sheet as their asset. And why? How can they do that? It's because they've been given an accounting exemption, and they operate as what's known as the nominee for you. So they hold your asset but pretend it's theirs. They can create the matching liability, which is equal to the deposit you made. So a bank deposit is the creation of debt. You then take a mortgage or a credit card or a loan, and it works in the same way, right? So you go and get a mortgage. I want £1 million mortgage. You're a banker. I'm a consumer. I come in, tick all the boxes. You say, yeah, you qualify in. So let's get you to sign this mortgage contract. I sign it. I'm now depositing £1 million with the bank. As a banker, I'm a banker. I'm depositing £1 million deposit. They match it as a liability on the other side of their balance sheet. Hey, presto, there's £1 million you'll find in your account here, as you would say to me as the banker. You probably don't even know what's happened. Now, that £1 million is a new debt, but who does it belong to? The bank misaccounted for it by saying it was their asset. It's not their asset. It's the creator's asset. And the creator is the body corporate, the banker from the Bills of Exchange Act 1882. So that's just two examples. If you then look at world debt, and by the way, central banks and treasuries and governments do exactly the same thing. They create the money supply by making a deposit, matching it on, assets, liability matching, creating that's your quantitative easing that they talk about, that, the Chancellor of the Exchequer might talk about. This alleged illness, I'm not sure if we can say that word, but this alleged illness that was around a while ago, we had to pump in all this new credit into the market and bail everybody out. Well, that's all they're doing is creating assets and liability matching. They can pump as much in there as they want, right?
So can I ask a quick question? Because if I'm right then to understand what you've just said, if I go into the bank and get £1 million mortgage, no, let's say I deposit £1 million into the bank.
Yeah.
And they then create £1 million on the ledger as well as a result of that. If I'm right to understand, that means I've got £2 million and the bank's got nothing.
Well, the bank's actually got £1 million because they're showing £1 million of that as theirs. Because they on their books, if banks are given an exemption, this is the club, right?
No, I understand what you're saying. Now, but if I'm right, forget what the bank says, because the bank's done that fraudulently. Surely then if I've deposited the money and they've created another £1 million as a result of it, the £1 million then surely somehow belongs to me.
Yes. Well, the million that you deposited belongs to you.
Yeah.
And then the new million, which is debt, gets circulated into the economy, right? So everyone else can start using that, and that it's just a ledger that they can use to deposit more and more. So this is how the debt just grows and grows and grows, right? You're never ever going to reduce this debt. It's impossible. When these idiots stand up in the government, say, "Oh, we're going to reduce the deficit," it's physically impossible, because everything is creation of new debt. You can't reduce debt with new debt. You can only increase the debt, right?
Yes.
So that's by the way, why there's inflation. That's how they control the boom and the bust economy. They can pump in more or less credit whenever they want. They can turn the dial up, turn it down. They can create asset bubbles. They can do anything they want, all at the central bank level. But most of it, 97% of all the money, without getting deeply into economics, 97% of the money comes from the body corporates who are depositing new, fresh securities with banks. And it's only banks that have been given the exemption, accounting exemption, to show this asset liability matching. And what they do is they report that deposit of a security as if it was theirs. And because they take on what's known as the nominee role. And that's where IRS publication 1212 comes in. Because following the House Joint Resolution 192, all of the banks, and linking it into the Federal Reserve Act, all of the banks that have got a license to be what's called a clearing bank, they can create this asset and liability matching program. They can have that available to them, and they're given an accounting exemption. But, and this is what everyone's going to be really interested in, the creator of the credit, which is the body corporate, the credit belongs to that body corporate. It's been abandoned because the true owner of it never claimed it. The bank pretends it's theirs until it's corrected, until the record is corrected. And then that credit has to come back.
Right.
And that's what's really interesting. And that's why they tried to jail me, because I figured out how to get the credit back. And it's not a theory, we're doing it.
Okay, so I'm conscious we're 57 minutes into this and people are going to be going, okay, cut to the chase. So on the section you've just covered, and coming back to the point you've just made, that you found a way to get this money back. So
yes,
because for me, and I know we were talking about this the other day about being able to claim money back through what you've used through your bank accounts, and and I looked over my last 3 years through my personal account, and with ins and outs and different things I've done, and it's about sort of £350,000 worth of money in and out. So how do we, as a layman here, because I'm good with my fingers and growing vegetables, I'm a damn farmer for Christ's sake. How does someone as simple as me ascertain, trying to claim back what is legally, lawfully, whichever way you word that, our own money? Because it seems to me like I've heard lots of people what talk a good talk about this, but no one was ever really proven to me that the system works. So enlighten me in how we go about this, because this is the bit what I think people are going to go, after our conversation the other day, I think people are going to go, how do I get involved in this?
Well, they should get involved in it, because it creates freedom, right? And that's why I'm pursuing it. That's why I'm rolling it out. We've got thousands of people doing it. We've got all the results. We can show you the results, and I can talk to anybody. I'll debate anybody in the world technically on why this works, right? Because it's exactly how the system is being built. There's no loophole. There's no like they're going to shut the door in 2 months or get in quick now or anything like that. This is exactly how the system is built. And I would say, and I'm pretty confident I'm right, the elites have known this for a long time, and that's how they finance themselves, right? They don't want to tell anybody else, because this is the holy grail of how to play Monopoly on that Monopoly board. You put a few other pieces on there, a few other strategies on that board, and you can now control your game of Monopoly. You can take back control from the crown, which is what all the protocols are aiming to do, right? So the first thing is you're not going to be able to figure this out by reading a couple of books and filling some forms in and sending them to the United States Treasury. You've got to know what you're doing. So I've got a tax department. We've got about 20 full-time tax professionals that are filing electronically straight into the US Department of Treasury system. It's called the FIRE system, believe it or not, right? FIRE. So what you do is you get your bank statements for the last 3 years. Now, because all those bank statements are going to indicate how much deposits were made into the bank accounts, right? Because it's all about deposits. Now, every bank will have a record. They have ledgers. They're all running on ledgers. All of these deposits that were made into the account and went and left the account, it's the ones that left the account are the ones that you can recoup, right? Because that's you're creating those deposits by transferring them or what appear to be transfers somewhere else, right? Now, if you can add them all up, now all of those are securities, because everything in this world on the monopoly board is based on securities. It sounds weird, but there's no money. It's all securities, and they've all got reference numbers. So if you were to watch the movie called The Big Short, which is Brad Pitt about 15, 20 years ago, talking about the collapse of the housing market in the United States and many other countries, all of these investment banks are trading securities. Well, all of these bank payments, all of these loans, credit cards, mortgages are all packaged up. They're all put into securities, and they've got reference numbers. They're called CUSIP numbers. So if you're an investment banker, you're trading bonds, you're trading financial instruments, and they've all got reference numbers. Well, all the bank payments that you've made, let's just say you've made bank payments to somewhere else, they all fit in these securities. So what we do is we find which securities they fit into. We find the bank's tax identification number, because everything is a tax and a security, right? So we get all these reference numbers. We do all that research. We've got a massive database of the world's banks and their EIN numbers, which is their employee number with the United States Treasury. We got the CUSIP numbers, so we know where the bank payments fit into the CUSIP numbers, which CUSIP number belongs to which tranche, which mortgage belongs to. You can do this with mortgages and bank payments. You can do it with other things as well, but we don't bother with all the other things because the bank payments and the mortgages are the big tickets. If you can recoup your bank payments and your mortgages, then you don't really need to worry about credit cards, loans, court cases, or anything else, because everything's securities, right? So we've got our tax department then will create an international trust. Now you need a pass-through entity to get in and out of the Treasury system. Now some people will file tax returns directly from the taxpayer straight to the United States Treasury. And if you go on YouTube and have a look on there, there's people talking about filing, recoupments directly, and it's very dangerous because they don't know what they're doing, right? Some people get a check or they get a recoupment, but then they have to pay it back because they don't know what they're doing with it. The way to do it is through an international trust, because the Treasury's left a doorway open to come in and out of the Treasury's ledger through an international trust. It's a particular type of international trust, right? So we create one of those. That's a pass-through entity to the taxpayer, to the body corporate. It enables us to file the tax returns equal to the bank payments and the face value of mortgages. And then the Treasury, they reconcile where those securities are in their system. They then put a credit on what's called the wages and tax transcript, which is what is going to be drawn down. And then the trust does a tax return. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? A tax return. They're returning the tax to the source, yeah? So then they return the tax, which is the recoupment, to the trust. And then from the trust, it goes back to the taxpayer, which is the body corporate. Okay, so if you've got bank payments of 300,000 and maybe a mortgage for 200,000, you've got abandoned credit of 500,000. You recoup that. You then spend it and you recoup it. Spend it, recoup it, spend it, recoup it.
Okay, so I don't want to go into how it works because, as far as I'm concerned, if people want to know, they need to be talking to you, not to me. And that isn't. I know there's no way I can do it any justice, or you, in the time we've got. So if anybody following wants to talk to Ian about that, we'll put a link in to be able to pass, your details on to Ian. So how long would something like this take? Because that's relevant to me because of where I'm going in the future. And what would that look like in regards to, because you made the point with me the other day when we were talking about this church and the church envoy side. Now, I'm guessing these two things must fit together, because somewhere in amongst all of this, I understand that there is the living person, not the corporate entity, and when we spoke the other day, this church envoy and belonging to a church to give you diplomatic immunity. Talk me through some more of this, because I've got to be honest, I've been studying this now for about 2 years. And I say study, working my way slowly through the system. And we spoke the other day and you blew my freaking head. So just take me through the next section of this. And I say, I don't want to get drawn into the technical, because that's for you to deal with everybody on a one-to-one basis.
I'll keep it high level. So if you can recoup your credit, so what you've got to realise, everyone's got to realise this, the banks are using our credit and you can recoup it, and it's lawful, and everybody should be doing it. The banks have no money to lend. They can only create credit when we deposit our energy with them. And because everything is bankrupt on that monopoly board, if you know how to recoup it, which we do, then it all comes back lawfully. There's no clawbacks, there's no taxes to pay, nothing. And it is the holy grail that will free a lot of people from debts, from having to pay HMRC and all that kind of stuff, which we can come back to later on. Then the next thing that you really need to do, the Crown, I'm just going to call them the Crown or the cabal, have tricked everybody into believing that they own things. Now, this is the really, really big deception that I think a lot of people are starting to wake up to. If you look at the car, start with the car. Who owns the car? It's not the living man, is it?
Not the person on the logbook, no.
No. You get the body corporate, which they own, by the way, because it's registered to them. So they own that body corporate. The living man, woman is a representative, an agent for it, operating in fraud, as we talked about earlier. So what's going on with the car is you get a car with money that doesn't exist. You deposited the credit with the bank. They gave you a loan. You get a car. Okay, fine. You can reuse that to travel around in, right? If you start driving, it's commercial. A lot of people know that, but it's more subtle than this. The car is registered to, if it's in the United Kingdom, DVLA, and you get a certificate back says you're the registered keeper. It's not you, it's the body corporate. So all you're doing is renting the car, even if it could be £1 million car. It doesn't matter what the value is. You're renting it back from the Crown. It sits on the monopoly board. It belongs to the Crown, right? Now, you can sell the title to it to someone else. And then you say, well, it's got to be mine because I can sell it. But you're not actually selling the car. You're just selling the equitable title. So you can sell that title on as many times as you want. And people can own it and say, yeah, I've got this car. That's why they can come and put a clamp on it. That's why they can tow it away if you don't pay the road taxes. Because it doesn't belong to you. You only have the use of it through equitable title. If you go back to the feudal system from years before, where the landlords owned all the land and all the workers, a lot of the farms were like this, used to get to use the land to grow crops, but the land belonged to the landlord, yeah? But it's the same system. It's just the Crown scooped all of those lands up and it's all registered to them. So everybody's renting from the Crown, right?
So can I ask a quick question then on that principle? When we buy a piece of land, a house, and we register it with land registry, that's exactly what we're doing. We're registering that land back to the government to say it's transferred from the person who did rent it before to me being the new rental person.
You're a new rental.
Jesus, that's a corrupt system.
So you see, you could buy Chelsea. You could buy the whole of Chelsea or anywhere you want. And all you're getting is an equitable title. You're not getting the legal title because that always stays with the Crown. So you can now use it and you're renting their asset from the monopoly board. It sits on that monopoly board, and you have to pay taxes on that, yeah, because you're borrowing it and renting it from them. So that's what taxes. All taxes are feudal. They're rental, right? Council tax, any kind of tax, even corporate tax. Because if you look at a company, how does a company spring into existence? A shareholder who is a body corporate that belongs to the Crown says, I'll have 100% shares in this company and I'll register it with the company's house. Well, yeah. Who does that company belong to? It belongs to the Crown, yeah, because you just registered it to them. You get to use it on the monopoly board. You have to pay corporate tax because you're using their corporate structure to do whatever it is you're doing in the company, and that's how they do corporation tax. Personal tax, all tax of the individual. Well, the individual is a body corporate, right? That's the birth certificate created entity. All that tax is tax of the body corporate. No living man or woman on the planet is taxable. They're all tax exempt, but they get us to pay taxes through our energy on the monopoly board and actual taxes because we're renting everything from the board. The house, the land, the factory, the investment account, the bank account, everything belongs. The legal title belongs to the Crown. And that's where they've really tricked us, because they get us in this illusion. You know, you can look out your window and see all your lovely, great big house and garden you've got, and your 3 cars on the drive and all these things. And you've got a pension and you've got an investment account, and you might have all these investments and you might have all these different things. But all you've really got is the equitable title. You are a pauper, as everybody is, unless you know how to play the game of Monopoly. Because it is a game of Monopoly.
Okay, so let's say we enter the game, and I know you know, we've spoke about how we can do this from my side here. If we get into the game, let's quote it as what you've said, how long does it take for us to be able to participate in drawing back some funds? I'm not going to say winning the game, because that would be stupid, because this is going to be, I'm assuming this is going to be a constant ongoing thing, because if I'm right, if you claim some money back, you re-spend it, you claim it back again, and so we're always going to be in this game. So for us to make the initial investment, because I'm assuming that there's a cost to be able to do this, how long do we have to look at from our side as the investor on that point? I don't know what the cost is, but you know, I'm sure you'll tell us. And what would I need to be looking at time-wise? Am I looking at something what's going to take me a month, 10 years? Is it something I'm going to have to leave to the grandkids? You know, how long are we looking at? Because obviously, for me, Ian, I'm going to be brutally honest here. For me, I've got to the point in my life where I'm 57. I've got nothing. I've lost it all on the monopoly board, playing in their courts, with their mortgages, with their businesses, with their corruption, their bank loans, their everything along the way. I've either lost it, given it away to ex-partners, whatever it might look like. So from my side, I've got to the point where I've got nothing left to lose. And I've always thought of myself as poor and broke. But actually, I feel quite liberated. And my partner and I have just had 7 months touring the country. And in that 7 months, I remember we were at Glastonbury, laying in the camper van overnight, and I've got a few tins of food under the bed and no money in my pocket. And I thought to myself, I have never felt so rich as I did that day, because I've got nothing else to lose. And it kind of got me to think that someone with nothing to lose is a very dangerous person, because most people who are in the system, Ian, if they're in the position that they've got a house, you know, let's say people up the ladder, they've got potentially 2 or 3 houses, a boat, several cars, you know, they've got so much skin in the game, they daren't rock the boat. Like you made the point of earlier, when they came to you, the bank came to you and said, Ian, we want you to play this game, and you go, I don't want to. You know at that point, all the stuff you've got, what you've deemed as all your worldly possessions, at that point, are going to be taken away from you, because that's how the game plays. Now, whether you did or didn't, because of naivety, understand it at the time, you certainly understand it now, like I do. So when someone like me has got nothing to lose, I think this is an interesting game to want to play, because most people, I would say, that that I've come across, even if they think, I'm going to say here, think they own their own home, or think they own their cars on the drive, think they own the money in the bank account, don't actually own sweet feck all. So if I want to step in and play this game, what's the timeline? Because I'm up for playing this. This actually invigorates me.
Well, to recoup credit depends on what time of the year you start, because the IRS have different cycles. They have different filing cycles. We're coming into a period in November where they actually close the IRS down until January. So there's about 6 weeks where they're closed. But if it's outside of that window, then you're talking, to get the tax transcript should take about no more than 3 months. And then from there, there's a 90-day cycle. So about 6 months if it's not in the closed tax season.
Sure.
So we're coming into November, mid-November, they start to close the IRS from a tax filing point of view down. They don't close down, but they just don't accept all the filings until they get to about January the 10th.
Yeah.
Right? Then it all ramps up again. So a good time to do it is between now and mid-November if you want to start the ball rolling. And that you can go and look at this. It's not a sales pitch. I'm just telling you that's when they shut their filings down, right? So the credit recoupment is a big part of this, but the next big part of it is, what do you do when you get the credit back, right? So what I suggest people do is that they get the legal title to the land. If you've got a house, if you've got a farm, or you've got a bit of land, or land and a house on it, or whatever it is, could be a hotel, could be anything. You need to get the legal title, and you can only get that if you get rid of the debt. So we've got a mortgage liberation protocol I've refined it over years. It's working, and that will discharge a current mortgage and then recoup the mortgage. So that's pretty interesting. Probably a different discussion for that one. Sure. But you've got to get rid of the debt. So get rid of the debt on the property and then deregister it from the Crown and then hold it in a private trust. And if you do that, you're now operating like the super rich do. They don't own things, they control them. They hold them in trust, not statutory trust, because that doesn't work. There's a particular type of international trust which the super elites use. We use them for filing, for the tax filings. You can hold assets in an international trust where you're the beneficiary of the trust. You get to use everything. You've deregistered it from the Crown. So if you want to get the Crown the fuck out of your land, you take the land out of their registration. And if you then want to go up to another level, is you become an envoy of a ministry. So you can be above the Crown's legal system by being an envoy for a ministry, a church ministry. And if you look at the Amish, if you look at the Military Order of Malta, if you look at the Church of Scientology, that's why they pay 10% to the Church of Scientology. People like Tom Cruise are paying 10% of their worldwide income, not because they're crazy, because they want the jurisdictional shield of going above the legal system. So you get out of that, you get all the assets out and you hold them in your international trust. You become an envoy for a church, which is why Republic of Old Souls logo's there. You're now operating above their system and they've got no jurisdiction on your land, because they only have jurisdiction on their land. So this is good for the farmers. Yeah, if the farmers get the land out of registration, get rid of the debt, recoup your credit, get the land into private trust, become an envoy for a ministry, and now you can operate in your own, it's like your own nation, if you like, because you've got, your borders. And they can't come on your land because they'd be trespassing. They can't bring in their legislation on that bit of land. Now, if you look at Windsor Castle, it's a very good example of this. That is deregistered. It's privately owned in trust. It's owned by the super elite, obviously. And that's how you do it. And everybody can do it. And the way you do it, the way you fund it or finance it, is by recouping the credit, which everybody's abandoned. Everybody, it's like everyone's walked down the high street with a big suitcase full of cash, dropped it on the pavement and walked on and just left it there.
So presumably when we hear people talk about the square mile in London or Washington, DC, or the Vatican, these all sit within their own sovereignty. They're off of the monopoly board in effect.
Yeah, look at all.
So if I'm right in saying that, if I'm right to understand this, a farmer who doesn't have let's say who doesn't have a mortgage at this point, because I understand there's options to be able to get the mortgage money back if they've got a mortgage, but let's say this is a generational farm, what's been handed down, and there is no mortgage, you can physically claim the title to say that you own that land, and you can then take it out of the governmental jurisdiction, out of the Crown's jurisdiction, so that you are then a sovereign state in your own right.
Yeah, the way they trap everybody is they get a debt on the title. So if with a debt on there, they've got their bank who's got this fake debt, which is actually your credit, but the bank says it's theirs. You can't shift that thing. And most people have a mortgage most of their adult life, so they can't get that land fee. It's called fee simple title. They can't get fee simple title because there's always a debt. And then they start bringing in. I mean, in the US, they bring in tax liens, so they start putting liens on the land so that you can't get rid of the debt there. That's something that will probably happen in the UK with this inheritance bullshit. They'll start putting liens on the land.
Sure. So I remember some years ago, I wanted to borrow some money for stuff, and I can't remember what the wording was, but I had to kind of take out a deposit against, they signed something on the house, which was registered at a company's house, so that if I defaulted, the bank effectively could claim that. So that's effectively what they're doing on everything we do, get us to sign to say there's a debt owed, and then once the debt's owed, they hold us in the system.
Yeah, they put debentures on things. Basically, they just put a register of debt on the land. That means that you can't untie it from the Crown's registration because it goes together. If you think of what is the purpose of land registry, it's to enslave all the tenants who think that they own property in a registration system that isn't just operating in the United Kingdom. It's every country has exactly the same system. This system is a one world system of registration, of companies, of land, of banking, of bank accounts, of pensions, everything. If you look at, there's a book which is I think well worth reading, which is all written about what people think they've got investments, right? So the affluent think they've got these investments and pensions. If you get into the knowledge that all of the financial instruments, including cryptocurrency, by the way, is always registered back to the Crown. So again, you get to use the digits, but they don't belong to you. Nothing. This is for me. This is I think there's a guy called Jeff Berwick who runs the Dollar Vigilante, and he's always saying zero on his videos. You own zero, but he doesn't actually understand what I have just explained. He's talking about your investments could go to zero. Well, you've got zero anyway, until you realize how to play the game Monopoly. Take the credit back, buy real assets with it, hold fee simple title in international trust. If you want to go above their system, become an envoy for a ministry, and now you're pretty much untouchable. You recycle that credit every year. Now you can start doing something that you like doing. If you don't like farming or working in an office or whatever it is you're doing, you don't have to do that anymore, because you're now playing Monopoly the way it should be played, but the way the elites play it.
Okay, let me take you back a few sentences ago to this church envoy section. Talk me through, because when we spoke about that the other day, that really appeals to my sense of humour and imagination. Now, my partner is Nigerian. She's been here in the UK for 2 years, and we've been dealing with let's just say the bullshit of tax collection via immigration. And there's no other word for it. This is a system where, as far as I can see, and I hate to say this in 2025, but all I can see is that I have licensed from the government my partner.
Yep.
That's what I've done. And that is just slavery. Call it what you want, but pay it what it's worth. Right?
Yep.
So So for me, having to deal with that nonsense, it's really stuck in the back of my throat when you're paying thousands of pounds to try and get this resolved. And they don't want you to resolve it, because the longer you're in the system, the more you have to pay in license fees. So for someone like me that has been through this side, and you spoke about the church envoy side, and I'm someone at this point that doesn't have a passport because I'm absolutely certain I don't want a digital currency. That's a whole new ball game. We know that. But so this church envoy, just talk me through that, will you? Because that really, really excites me.
Yeah, well, let's unpack it a little bit, right? So there's a lot of people out there, and I love all these guys that are trying to get free of the system. I love their energy. I love their focus, their dedication, their passion. But what they haven't understood in most, I've looked at nearly everybody out there and what they're all doing, right? What they don't realize is that the joinder from the birth certificate onwards, that using the name, the body corporate name, that without restructuring that, you're never going to have any rights, okay? Because it's designed to take your rights away. So what you've got to do is you've got to reverse engineer it. Now, if you look at the Sesquivet V Act of 1666 and 1707, those acts are as in force today as they were when they first came out, right? They've never changed. And there's a reason, and they are operative all over the world, by the way. It's not just in the UK that you see, the Sesquivet V Act. They're all everywhere. And there's a reason why, because in those acts, they presume in the legal system, there's a lot of presumptions, right? And, it becomes common practice and presumption, right? A lot of people say, all you've got to do is serve the 12 presumptions of law and you can step out of the system. It's total nonsense. A lot of people would say you can serve the Baron Ward David affidavit and that'll get you out of the system. Total nonsense. A lot of people will say, if you ever go in a courtroom, hold up the birth certificate and say, this is not me, I'm a living man, I'm under God, and that's going to break you throughout the system. It's never going to work. You could send declarations in to anybody you like in the government or in their crown registrar or the crown offices and say, I've now made a declaration, I'm not this body corporate, I'm over here as a living man. That's not going to work either, right? And the reason it doesn't work is because there's all those guys that are doing that are still using the name that belongs to the crown. So you haven't broken out of that impersonation fraud, and they've tricked everyone. That's why they do the register at school. They call your name, call your name, call your name. You keep saying, yeah, I'm Smith, I'm Brown, I'm Jones, because they want to indoctrinate you. They want to program you to believe that you are that thing. So how do you unwind it? Well, you go to the Sesquivet V Act 1666 and 1707. It tells you in there that if you make a declaration of the fact that you are alive, they have to acknowledge that declaration. So it starts with that, but that on its own isn't enough, right? If you look at the body corporate as the piece on the monopoly board, you don't want to get rid of that piece because that piece is your banker. You want to use that thing, right? You want to get credit. You want to put it on the board and recoup it. So you don't want to get rid of that. A lot of people say get rid of the body corporate, and by the way, you can't because it's already registered. It's like it's registered in perpetuity, by the way. And even when the living man dies, it still carries on in probate, right? All these estates just go on and on and on and on and on. You can't get rid of it, but what you can do is you can take charge of it. Now, if you look at probate, and I studied law, probate law, trust law when I was doing all my financial services, because that's something you're supposed to understand, right? Everything that's dead, and the body corporate is a decedent estate because the placenta died, has to have an executor. It's like a will. Right. Yeah, every decedent estate has to have a will, has to have an executor. Well, who's the executor of the estate right now? The Crown. No, right. The Crown.
Okay.
So they control the body corporate by being the executor of it. And they get you to represent it as its agent.
Right.
So that's how they've controlled it. So what you do is you make a declaration of being alive, which you can do under the Sesquivet v. 1666, 1707, and then you occupy what's called the office of the general executor. So the living man is rescinded using the name from the birth certificate onwards. This is all how you become an envoy for a church, by the way.
Yeah.
You rescind using the name. Now, in fraud, if you realise that there is a fraud going on, you can rescind it if you didn't know about it. So if you don't know that you're using the name in fraud, you can't be held guilty for that. If you rescind it back to the birth certificate, make a declaration of life, now you occupy the office of the general executor. Now you can be a living man under God, living woman under God, because you've now broken that joinder, but you still control the body corporate because you occupy the office. Everything's got an office, by the way. On that monopoly board, there's an office above everything. Yeah. So you occupy the office as a living man, woman, as its general executor, removing the crown, who are known, it's Latin, it's called executor de sontor, because they're operating that body corporate in fraud as its executor of all the wrongs. You replace the crown. You become the occupant of the office of the general executor. Now you've got control over the body corporate. You don't represent it in fraud anymore because you don't use its name. So Ian Clifford is the proper name of Ian Clifford's stamp. Stamp belongs to the crown. That's the body corporate. I never used that. I did all this 2-3 years ago. That's, by the way, one of the reasons why I'm still free. Because the right now, if you go and Google it, you'll see the FCA and Southwark Crown Court put a custodial sentence of 12 months over Ian Clifford's stamp for this bogus order I talked about earlier on. Well, Ian Clifford's never been constrained by that order. I'm an envoy for a church, and I'm out in a jurisdiction that they don't have any reach into. So I'm protected on all sides, right? Which is why I'm not in jail right now. Now, my story is extreme, and I don't want anyone to believe that if you do what I'm talking about, they're going to put you in jail. I'm just an extreme example of someone who's disrupted the system and fought against it, and they know that I'm a little bit tenacious, and they wanted to get rid of me. That's not going to happen to the average guy on the street who's just recouping his credit and holding his assets in trust. Sure. He's not really a threat to their system. So that's how you do it. You take back control of the land, and you can have anything you want, and you can put your business in the trust. So you could put the farm business in there. You put any business you like in there. By the way, the trust is tax exempt because it's an international trust. It doesn't have, there's no taxes applicable at all. You can run all your banking through the trust. So I did a webinar last weekend on avoiding the digital ID. This is how you do it. You put a trust on the monopoly board. That trust doesn't have to comply with digital ID. You can run all your banking. You can run all your commerce through it. No taxes. And you can get fee simple title over your assets under the trust. And you can also control the body corporate. Yeah, okay, they're still going to say that body corporate needs a digital ID. But you don't need it if you're renting. You can put your rental contract in the trust. You can put anything you want in the trust. That's what the elite do. Control everything, own nothing, but be the beneficiary of the credit and be the beneficiary of the assets in the trust. That's how to play Monopoly smartly.
So when Klaus Schwab told us we'll own nothing and be happy, he actually wasn't wrong if we knew how to play the game.
What he was telling us was, and I'm sure he was having a bit of a laugh, was that we own nothing now and we might be happy. We might not be so happy in the future because it's going to get a lot worse. But it's not like they're going to push a button and everyone's going to lose their assets. Because a lot of people have said, well, they're not going to get me because I've got this and that and the other and I'm pretty secure. So that Klaus Schwab guy must be a bit of an idiot. No, he's not an idiot at all. He absolutely knows what's going on. All the elites know what's going on with this monopoly board system. I've written books on it. So if your audience wants copies of the books, they can read. If they want to read something, I know a lot of people don't want to read things, but if they want to read how all this has been wired up, I've got several books that explain it all. I do webinars, and this is not a theory. This is real, right? And this, to me, is how everybody should know this, even if they don't want to execute on it. At least they should know about it.
So, Ian, just take me through something, because obviously I know in films in the past we see people talk about diplomatic immunity, and that seems to be something they do when they. I know that Bill Gates is a classic example. He has diplomatic immunity because of an island he owns, which he says he's never stepped foot onto, but he is the sole beneficiary and the sole administrator of that island. So am I right then to assume, with what you're talking about with the church envoy side, is that kind of where you're heading to with that?
Well, we've already got it. You see, you can create a nation, right? So a lot of people don't understand what a nation is. They think it's a bit of land with a government and an army and a navy and all this kind of thing. No, a nation it's a body politic. So you look at the Montevideo Convention, I know it's legislation, but it's international legislation which defines what a nation is. So a nation is a group. It can be two men and women that come together as a nation. Right. It doesn't have to have a piece of land, but if you've got some land, you can declare that as your nation. So, for example, if you've got a big bit of land and you want to deregister it from the Crown and call it an auxiliary ministry of the Republic of Old Souls, give it a name, that can be your nation. And then you can have your borders, just like Andorra, just like Monaco, just like any of these nations. You can have your own rules, your own ways of doing things on your nation, in your nation. But you don't even have to have land. You don't want it. And then you become a diplomat for that nation. You can be a diplomat for the Republic of Old Souls. And a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but how am I going to be able to travel? Well, I'm working at the moment, and I can't guarantee this will work, but I'm pretty confident that it will work, because in the law it should work. You see, the Republic of Old Souls is registered church in the United States system, and it's covered under Article 1 of the original Constitution. Now, that's pretty important, because if you have that standing as a church, your envoys can become diplomats of the United States Incorporated. So you can actually get a United States passport as a diplomat and as an envoy of a church. And that, I don't think they're going to close that down. They're going to close other passports down, I'm pretty sure of it, going forward.
I think
all the restrictions on travel almost nailed on. But not the diplomats and not the envoys. Okay. I'm working on that now. I can't guarantee I'll pull it off, but I'm working on it. I've done all my study. I'm absolutely certain that the law permits it. Whether they'll give it out, I don't know yet, because all my forms are in with the American Embassy. They've asked me 3 rounds of questions. I've answered them all, and they haven't denied it. So if I get that, that's how we're all going to be able to travel, because they're not going to stop the diplomats and the envoys traveling around. No, because the elites are going to want to travel, aren't they?
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you one more question, because I'm conscious of the time. We're at an hour and 40 minutes. So I'm conscious of that. You mentioned several times about 1666. Now, we obviously all know that there was a big thing happened in 1666. Great Fire of London, swept through London, clearing a lot of the land, let's say, of the people who owned it and the people who had been there for centuries, clearing it, ready for the next reset, let's say, potentially, at that time. Does that all tie in to do with that? Because obviously, I know the bullshit we're fed with 1666 was, Baker Street, or was it, where they had the baker set fire to the, to the bakery, and, and it burnt down. Was it Pudding Lane? I never really did buy that, because I find it hard to believe that we see this now. Now, forget how they achieved it. We've seen it across America, in the last year, where they've deliberately cleared certain areas because of the amount of lithium underneath them. And if the land underneath London was what they were after, claiming to put it back into the crown, then do you think that all tied in? Because we make the assumption, Ian, as standard people here, that we're at the top of our game. We think that by the year 2025, where we are now, we're very smart, we're very clever, and that they were idiots 400 years ago. But when you actually look into it, this game they're playing, this Monopoly board's been in play for hundreds upon hundreds of years. This dates right back to the Roman Empire, a lot of this. So am I right to assume then that the 1066 wasn't just about a fire of London?
No, it was about getting people to register, because if you were displaced, so it's problem, reaction, solution. You burn London down. Everyone goes on the Thames to get out of the way of the fire. When they come back, there's no properties left, so you have to register. So it's how they started getting registration. You look at 1887, I think it was. You got the Midwife Act came in, and then suddenly you've got to register your baby. You never had to before. There was just a doomsday book. They just to write people's names down. So all these things, you go all. I do a webinar, 2 hours, which goes all the way back to Babylon, all the way through all the key things that have happened to gradually coerce us and corral us down the road they want to take us. And they're still doing it now. You know, the digital ID is just another step of that.
Oh, absolutely.
What they like to say the totalitarian tiptoe. It's been tiptoeing along, but they're starting to foxtrot now. They're starting to get a bit quicker now, I think.
Well, they're getting more confident, aren't they? I think they're getting confident. I think there's two things going on. One, they're getting more confident, and two, they're getting more desperate. So I think the desperation is speeding them up, you know. And I think that people talk about, you know, from my side with the food shortages and that, what I know are coming, and we always talk about the 2030 agenda. It was never the 2030 agenda. It was always the 2025, 26 agenda, and it will be in place by 2030. So when people say, oh, they're bringing it all forward, I don't think they actually are. I think what they're doing is they're delivering on dot what they said they were going to when they said they were going to. People who think by 2030, you know, we're going to have a digital ID. No, I'm pretty confident we will have a digital ID inside the next 6 to 12 months. I'm also pretty confident to say that within the next 6 to 12 months, we'll have a digital currency. You know,
well, people can,
well, I was going to say, people can believe that we have cash, but you and I both know that in reality of things, we actually have a pile of these things, and they are already a digital currency. Whether we like to accept it or not, we're naive if we think it's not the case.
Ask the Canadian truckers who did the protest a few years ago. Ask them about whether they're tracked and traced on their banks. They just turned all the bank accounts off. That's how they dispersed the truckers, and that's what they're going to do. Digital IDs, that on steroids, isn't it? So that's what.
Well, I mean, you've only got to look at Vietnam the other day. Was it 84 million bank accounts shut down overnight because they wouldn't participate? Yeah.
So what you do is you run all your banking through an international trust that doesn't have to comply with any of that bullshit. That's what you do. And that to me, you can't get a digital ID to apply because the international trust is a nation in its own right as well. It has its own law. It's tax exempt. It's the elites are using these this type of international trust for their purposes. They're not going to take that away. That's what they're using on the monopoly board.
Yeah. Okay, Ian, I'm conscious we've been an hour and 3/4 on this, and we haven't, I'm sure, touched the surface. I've spoken to you twice now for about, you know, it's coming up for over 3 hours, and I every now and again think I just get to understand one little bit, and you chuck something else in which fries my head. I've really enjoyed doing this, and I don't do a lot of interviews, I have to say, because for me, you know, I only talk about the food and farming, but I'm also conscious that within the future, food and farming is going to look very different, Ian, and we've got to find a solution for farmers to be able to pay off these huge mortgages on farms, to get rid of all financial debts they've got held against. You know, this is why they're in the perpetual cycle of every 3 years replacing all the finance on the farm and getting all new tractors, all new combines, strap up another £2.5 million worth of debt against the farm, and they're on this perpetual treadmill which they can never ever get out of. That's also one of the other reasons with the inheritance tax that farmers are so scared of what's going to happen, because they know they don't earn any money from the farm. The only time the farm ever earns any money is if it's past a generation or they sell it and they draw the money down and they've actually got the money in their hands, because that's the only time you ever ascertain the actual asset's value. We know that. So for me, if there's an opportunity here for people, if I take just farmers in this, you know, yes, I know lots of people have got their houses and things they'll 100% want to talk to you about securing, let's say. But for me, I've got a link from yourself which I can get people, we can add to this on social media for people to be able to click, go through, register with yourself, talk to yourselves or whatever. I think this is a crucial part of where we need to go, because effectively from my side, what I've got out of this, we've addressed 3 issues. One is how to eliminate the debt we have and to draw that credit back to us. 2, how to possibly then look at securing the land and so forth with the correct title, so we sit outside the crown. And 3, to be able to sit with inside your own sovereignty, your own land and so forth, that you then are the rightful owner of, and you hold the diplomatic immunity to be able to travel. That to me is just a vast amount of information. So, okay, so for me, I know where I am on this. You know, if anybody is watching this and has got any questions to ask, don't ask me because I'm the layman in this. We'll put a link in below. Contact Ian and the team and work forward from there, because I think, you know, like I say, I've looked at lots of different options to do around this arena, Ian. Nothing's ever really sparked my imagination to the full, apart from, oh, that's lovely, because no one ever seems to have delivered sweet feckle. And that seems to be the challenge. You know, when this comes down to it, that's where we all are on this. We're all on you know, this spiritual journey, awakening, the great reset, whatever it might be. The only difference, as far as I'm concerned, with the next reset is which side of it we're on. We're either going to be the ones trapped and enslaved in poverty, or we're going to be sitting on the other side of the fence going, well, actually, I don't want to participate on that side. So I'm kind of thinking, if this is en route within the next 12 months, I want to be looking at my options to get out and be in a different playing field on this.
You know, everybody needs to know how to play that game. We thought we knew. We thought we were playing some other game. We thought we were playing, if we're really good at business or really good in our job, we can get wealth. But we didn't realise it was all, we're just on a hamster wheel, running around that wheel. We're not getting anywhere. We think we are, but we're not really. The secret's been all around us all the time. We haven't seen it. I don't want us to see it. I've just had to find it. I put all the pieces together. That's what I do. I'm shit at many things. I'm good at joining dots up. I'm good at solving complex problems. And what I do is I facilitate it. So that a lot of people say, go and buy my book, go and buy my course. I don't do any of that, because I know that people, they want it facilitated. We've got a team. We've got 60 guys who facilitate. We're operating in Canada, Australia, United States, UK, Europe. We've got a lot of coverage. It's really, the momentum is building behind it. Is there a lot of propaganda about me? Absolutely. You go and Google, man, you're going to get page after page of propaganda. Look, there's people that work for the Crown that are permanently putting propaganda out and calling me a criminal and a fraudster and all, you name it, they're calling me it. But you come and look at the testimonials from our members and you'll see a very different story, right? Now, in order for the information to be delivered, you can't just read a book and get all this in your head. You've got to come to webinars. That's how I deliver the information. I did one 2 weeks ago. It's called The Farmer's Great Defense. It's a webinar. You can come and watch that. I break it all down. And then there's other webinars. I try and break things down fairly simply. And then there's things to read if you want to read them. But the big difference in what we're doing, not only does it work, but we facilitate it. And that's what I think people really want.
I would agree. And the reason I say I'd agree on that, from the farming community, Ian, they've always busy. They've got fertilizer to put on. They've got lambs lambing, cows calving. They've got pigs getting piglets out. Everyone's always got something to do on a farm, and that's always the challenge. So for me, I think that is a big aspect. And I think the fear factor as well, Ian, because if you're sitting with the family farm, and most farms sit in millions upon millions of pounds worth of value and assets. You're not talking about a few quid. You're talking about millions upon potentially tens or even hundreds of millions on some of the bigger estates. And what people don't want to do is jeopardize that in the future for them or their family, what they're trying to protect. So I think that's a necessity from where I sit, because all of the time I've looked at this all the way down the line, it's always been people saying, oh, come on my course, take my book, it's easy, you can do this. I don't have that confidence or ability to be able to do it. And I know my strengths and weaknesses. I don't understand it. And to be honest, I'd rather have my hands in the soil and not understand it For me, I'd rather grow vegetables and leave someone with your technical ability and knowledge to worry about it. So for me, I guess I think you're right. And I think that there's never been enough in what I've seen of anybody else talking about things, that there's that hand holding there with a big group of people that have already delivered on this time and time again. So to me, that's key. Ian, conscious we're nearly 2 hours in. I've got a whole load of stuff to get done around here. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me again on this. And as much as I'm starting to understand it, I'm sure we're going to have a lot more detailed conversations through this. And I'm going to look forward to getting going on this, because from my side, you know, if they owe me some money, I want it. And I've got great things I could go and achieve with that, especially for, you know, what we're doing in the food and farming industry at the moment, and how we want to protect that and make sure things are better for the future. So, Ian, again, thank you so much. And quickly, I'm going to put the link in below, but do you want to clarify a website address?
We've got the Republic of Old Souls. That doesn't tell you too much. It's all really in our private platform. It's not that I'm being secretive. It's just that most of our members come through referrals, so we don't have to blazon it all over social media or anything like that. And people don't get it anyway when you do that. They get it when they've been referred more than they do with advertising it. There's the Great Escape Protocols, which is really interesting website, which breaks down the 6 protocols with some videos. We've got the Farmer's Great Defense. I've just done the No Digital ID. That's another website we've put together. Next week, I'm doing the council tax. So a lot of people are bent out of shape on council tax. I can show you how to peacefully, peacefully discharge that and never have to pay council tax in the future. That's what I'm doing on Saturday. So yeah, that's what I do. I just look at the problem and then see what protocols we can put together in a package to solve the problem. And that's what people want, in my experience. We get hundreds and hundreds of people coming on every webinar. And generally speaking, at the end of it, we get 85%, 90% of the people that come on it who want to proceed with it. That's how popular these things are.
Fantastic. Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking nearly 2 hours of your life out to talk to someone who's just crazy enough to, wear his great granddad's bowler hat. For all the people that are listened in and they've got 2 hours into this conversation, click the link below and go and talk to Ian and the guys, because they obviously know what they're doing and I do not. For entertainment purposes only, thank you all for being here, because we all know it's all about entertainment. Ian, thank you so much for taking the time, my friend, and I really enjoyed today, and it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll look forward to putting the link in below. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.